Hi, I'm Larry DeBoer, and I'm a professor of agricultural economics at Purdue University, and I work for the Purdue Cooperative Extension Service as well. And I'd like to tell you some more about farmland assessment for property taxes in Indiana, and this is the second of two videos about this topic. Well, in the General Assembly in March of 2010, they passed Senate Bill 396, which changed the way that the base rate for farmland is calculated in Indiana. And the base rate, as we talked about last time, is the beginning of the assessed value of farmland for all the acreage in Indiana. It's a dollar amount per acre, and it's revised every year based on changes in commodity prices and land rents and interest rates and yields and costs and other objective measures of property wealth, as our Indiana Supreme Court requires. Well, what you see here are three different bars, and the bar on the left, the single bar, as you see for 2010, shows a base rate of $12.50, and that's what the base rate is for taxes payable in 2010. But then for the rest of the years here, for 2011, 2012, and 2013, you see three different calculations. The bars on the left are the system that we've got now as a result of Senate Bill 396. And what we're going to do is to take 6 years of calculations and then drop the year that produces the highest value and average the remaining 5 years. And of course, since you drop the highest value from the average, that reduces the assessed value, the base rate for farmland. And so we expect that the base rate for farmland for taxes payable in 2011 will be $1,290, which is about a 3% increase from $1,250. Had we not made this change, had we used the old system where you averaged just the 6 years together without dropping the highest rate, the number would have been $1,400, and you see that in the middle bar. Now, when Senate Bill 396 originated out of the Senate, it had a somewhat different formula. It was called the Olympic average, and what it did was to drop both the highest and the lowest value and average the remaining four. And as it turned out for taxes in 2011, that would not have changed the base rate of farmland. It would have remained at $1,400 because the highest value and the lowest value were about the same distance from the average, and so you remove those two, the average stayed the same. The bill that actually passed, and the Senate Bill 396 passed the Senate unanimously, went over to the House and was amended with a lot of economic development ideas. Then passed the House, went over to the Senate. They stripped all those ideas back out, and what was left over was this new version of the base rate with only the highest value subtracted. Well, when we move on to 2012, for tax bills in 2012, as you can see, the base rate that we're expecting to see is $1,500, and that the base rate would have been $1,700 without the Senate Bill 396 change. The Olympic average would have produced $1,590. And for taxes payable in 2013, we're expecting the base rate to be $1,620, and a base rate would have been $1,810. Had the 6-year average not been changed. The Olympic average would have produced $1,750. So what do you say about this? Is this a tax cut for farmland owners? The answer, I guess, is yes and no. It is certainly not a tax cut in the sense that we expect the base rate to continue to increase. By 2013, the base rate will be about 30% higher than it is today. It will be up to $1,620, whereas today it's $1,250. So that's a substantial increase to be expected in farmland property taxes. On the other hand, the increase would have been 45% had Senate Bill 396 not passed. And so, in that sense, compared to what would have happened, farmland is going to see a tax cut. At least it will be a smaller tax increase than we would have seen without Senate Bill 396. There are consequences for other taxpayers, however, from this change, and you can see on the next slide here one of those consequences. Because of the change in the way we assess farmland, we're going to reduce the total assessed value, especially in rural areas where farmland is an important part of the tax base. If assessed value is lower, the tax rate required to raise any particular tax amount, any particular revenue amount, has to be higher, which means that as we move forward and as assessed values increase, tax rates will not fall as much as they would had we not changed the assessment formula. And because tax rates will not fall as much, tax bills of non-farm taxpayers won't fall as much either. In a sense, we will prevent some of the shift that would have occurred from non-farm taxpayers to farmland taxpayers because of Senate Bill 396. Another thing that is likely to be a consequence of this change is that the tax rates will be higher than they would have been. And because tax rates will be higher than they would have been, as we see on this next slide, more taxpayers will be eligible for the circuit breaker credits or the tax cap credits. Taxpayers will be more likely to see their tax bills exceed the tax caps, and they will therefore receive a credit so that they don't have to pay their full tax bill. Well, if they don't pay their full tax bill, then the local governments receive less in tax revenue. So this change in the way we assess farmland reduces assessed value, raises tax rates from what they would have been, and makes local governments in rural areas more vulnerable to revenue losses from the tax caps. Last slide here, last thing to point out is that these effects will be biggest in rural areas where farmland is a big part of the tax base. In urban areas and statewide, this will be an effect that will be very hard for anybody to notice other than owners of farmland. Owners of farmland will certainly notice, but the shift in taxes will be very difficult for those in urban areas to see because farmland is a relatively small share of the total tax base in urban areas and in suburban areas. In rural areas, however, in a lot of rural areas, all you've got is farmland and housing, and so the effects there will be greater. Well, that's what I have to say about farmland assessment for property taxes in Indiana. And for the Cooperative Extension Service and the Agricultural Economics Department at Purdue University, I'm Larry DeBoer.